Hello and welcome to Con Carolinas. This is on the writing panel. This is Deathbuilding, and I'm Darren Kennedy. I'll be your moderator today, and I'd like to take a moment for each of my panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Michael Williams.
Hey, I'm Michael G. Williams.
That is an excellent introduction. Next up, Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen Perry, but I used my maiden name, Jen Guberman, for my books because nobody else has that name. I'm the author of the EOS Dawn series.
Excellent. Mo?
My name is Maurice Broadus, author of Pimp My Airship and The Usual Suspects. Those are my two latest.
Great. And I write these things. So we will start with what is this panel about? The original idea for this panel was that people were going to write in and give us an idea about, hey, I've got this character in my book and I would like to kill them in a really interesting way. And will you find authors? Please help me with that. And we did get one person to write in, so I thought we would start with that. And then we will take this in a different direction. So another Charlotte author, Tracy Loudon, she writes The Last of the Ageless, is working on a new book that's a high fantasy where her big bad is, I believe, a woman named Iona who can transform into things like a puma or other, dangerous critters. And there's lots of elves and fae and other entities in this thing. And she was like, I would like a really interesting way how to kill off my shape-shifting evil queen-ish character in a world full of elves and fae and shapeshifters. So go. Michael looks like he's got something right on the tip of his tongue.
Well, it seems obvious to me that the most dangerous thing they can do is shapeshift into something that somebody else would be hunting without knowing it's them. I'm trying to think of if they shapeshifted into, or just something that's prone to getting killed anyway. If they shapeshifted into a possum in rural North Carolina, things like that. I'm trying to think though, what would be. Go to somebody else. I'm still working on it.
I'm actually trying to summon what's the Greek myth where the person shapeshifts into the thing that their lover is hunting because they're tricked into shapeshifting into.
Oh.
That's an actual Greek myth. Is it Antiope? Remember? I will have to look this up later. My fifth grade mythology obsessed brain is remembering that somewhere in Greek mythology, someone got tricked into, I believe it was Apollo's lover gets tricked into shapeshifting into the thing that Apollo's hunting because the person that wanted to date Apollo was tired of getting double dealt or something like that. Have to check that one out. For once, it wasn't Zeus's insatiable hungers, quote unquote, that were causing the problem.
Fair enough.
Jen, what you got?
Oh, man, so he kind of stole my train of thought on that, but I was thinking pretty much same thing, just transforming into something, doesn't even have to be ordinary or easy to kill per se, but even maybe just a complication with transforming into, gosh, I can't even think of an example of one, because this is really tricky. It's so specific, but it almost makes me think of with the Harry Potter books back when they were learning how to I hate that I'm blanking on the word, basically teleport.
Teleportation.
Thank you. But basically how they could go an eyebrow would go missing. But something like that, something maybe just in a moment of panic or something trying to get away, that's typically her strength, and she gets a little too confident maybe, and something goes horrifically wrong because she can't make up her mind maybe what she wants. I don't know exactly the logistics of how she picks what she turns into, but maybe something goes awry because she can't make up her mind at the right time.
I got you. Mo, what's your grand scheme?
Look here. I am actually the absolute worst at all of this, just so you know. I so rarely kill off characters.
Right.
I just don't kill them off very often, and the few times I kill off characters, I get all this hate mail, so I'm just like, you know what, it's not even worth it. So part of my writing process, actually, when I do have to kill off a character, usually involves me, I probably shouldn't even say this, as a new middle grade author, I probably shouldn't admit to this, but a lot of my process involves, calling up a buddy, us killing off a bottle of vodka and going, all right, so how should we kill him off this time? So, so I got nothing right now because I have no vodka in front of me. Well, I say that's not even true, but I have
That sounds like a preparedness problem.
Right?
Hey, it's
if liquor is an obstacle to publication, then I think we're all in trouble as an industry. You know?
Not only is it 5 o'clock somewhere, it's 5 o'clock right now as we're
now.
recording this.
Yes.
So in Indianapolis, it's only 4, right?
No, we are 5. We're just after 5.
Just after 5. Okay, then I'm not getting my time zones right. My bad. So,
But like the thing I'm thinking of is something almost like the stuff that you were saying in the myth, Darren, of just like, what if they turn into a fox to get away, and then they run across Downton Abbey, you know, in the middle of a fox hunt, or like, what if they turn into a squirrel or a field mouse or something to sneak somewhere, and an owl gets them, you know, things like that.
You just made me
think. What if you don't even get to?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I'm saying my whole thing is like, what if you don't even get to complete the transformation?
Oh,
like you get stuck mid
transformation. Yeah. and Michael just made me think of one of my favorite movie scenes of all time. I think it's one of the most perfect endings of anything. It's the end of Jurassic Park, where for a while the T-Rex was the big bad that we were running from. And then they do all kinds of stuff with the velociraptors to make you forget about the T-Rex. And then just at the moment where the velociraptor is about to eat everybody, and you're like, the world is over, literally the T-Rex just comes in, and the rule of nature comes back, and you whack the velociraptor because you forgot the big bad was still walking along. So I think that we can marry up a lot of that. I'm also thinking sort of a Wile E. Coyote thing where, you know, he's like sitting there and all of a sudden remembers there's gravity, and then he falls to his death for the 400th time fighting the Roadrunner. What if you're like shapeshifted into a bird, and then you have to turn into a puma to do your puma thing, and you're like, oh no, I'm at the edge of a cliff, and then it's over. So somewhere in there I think is a recipe for success for Tracy. So Tracy, I hope you appreciate our best efforts at killing off this character that you've imagined in your mind, and good luck with that book.
I do have to wonder, like, is she looking for an ironic death, or is she looking for, like, sort of hoisted on their own petard, or is she just looking for it happened?
I really don't know.
It's like if they're an evil queen, I can imagine turning into a T-Rex, because they're going to, like, stampede, they're going to rampage and, like, kill a whole bunch of people. And then whoever they're trying to kill, like, sort of herds them into a space that as a person they think of as big and open and expansive. But as a dinosaur, it turns out is too cramped for them to maneuver, and then they're trapped.
Then there's another one of my favorite tropes, which is where the protagonist has been trying to learn how to do the thing the antagonist can do through the entire thing. And then you get to the end, and Iona's like, I am a puma. And your character finally figures out, zoom, I'm a lion. Bam. And there's that, you know, it's what you just said. I learned how to turn into the thing that eats the thing that you can turn into, nanner, boo-boo. You know, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fun stuff there. So have fun killing Iona, Tracy. Let us know what you decided. We're eager to find out. So we're going to shift gears and talk about death, sort of building the death into your story. You know, a lot of stories have death. It might be the impetus. You know, Hamlet is all started and predicated on the death of a character that happens before, versus other stories, you know, the death of a major character, either hero or villain, at some point along the movie is like huge turning points. So I guess there's 100 different ways to look at this. How do you, something Jen and I were talking about just before we come on was, how do you make a death sort of believable or authentic? And I guess even more importantly, earned. You know, you earned that. So since that was Jen's fantastic idea, I'm going to let her lead off on this particular question.
All right. Well, kind of what I had mentioned before we started recording this is just a little piece of advice, I guess, I like to give people when they're trying to get into writing, whether it's actual death itself or just like a near death or anything like that is just that inaccuracy is the death of immersion. So if you have somebody who has background in the medical field and you're like, I'm going to shoot this character, it's going to be dramatic and this and that, and they're going to go, fighting in the battle, but they're like covered in bullet holes, you have to make sure that it's realistic. And it might be something really subtle that, I don't have any kind of medical background. I studied communications, but I still questioned it and I did the research and I was like, okay, if you're shot here, what happens? How much blood do you lose? Like what's that like? And you do some really morbid research, but it kind of makes sure that no matter who's reading your book and no matter, how intense the fiction is, because it might be super unrealistic stuff happening, but you still want the death itself to feel real to your reader. And if it doesn't, that pulls them away from your story and reminds them, hey, this is fake.
And tell us, when you're doing the research for that, can you give a couple Jen tips on, how do I make my deaths accurate?
Ooh, oh, okay. Man, that's tough. Research everything, any combinations of the words of pretty much what you're going to do. And so I guess kind of an example is, and this one isn't actually, I don't want to spoil too much in case anybody reads my books, but it's not completely a death. That sounds really contradictory, but basically it leaves you wondering for a little while. And I wanted this to be bloody. I knew I wanted them to get shot. I wanted it to be dramatic. I wanted the chance that they could pass out. But I didn't want it to necessarily be like a one and done, like obviously they're going to die from it. I wanted to leave it up in the air. And I had to do a lot of research because it ended up being a really obscure answer where it had to like graze the top of their scalp because there are a lot of blood vessels. And so it'd be really bloody. And like, depending on the person, I guess that, they could pass out. It's not as likely as other places, but they can survive it. And it was a really difficult thing to find. And sometimes you might actually end up with things like, you might read medical journals, but you might, in the case of, what I found is I actually found a news article about a girl who the same thing happened to her where a bullet grazed the top of her head while she was on the beach, and just describing like what that felt like and what it looked like and how that happened. So you might end up reading news articles.
I was
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say along those lines, as far as doing research, make friends with a medical examiner. Because I was at a coffee shop once, and I was just wearing. Ironically, I was wearing a sweatshirt that said "Homicide: Life in the Streets" because that was like my favorite cop show at the time. And then a guy just looks over at me and goes, "Hey, what do you think about that show?" And I talked about that and a couple reality shows I was watching. There was a reality show that took place here in Indianapolis, following police detectives. And turns out I was talking to the local medical examiner, and the thing about medical examiners is they love to be tapped for exactly this sort of thing. They're like, hey, you know what? If you ever have a question, come see me. I'll break it all down for you. And so yeah, make friends in the medical examining community, or any doctors for that matter. They love to tell war stories. So and the thing that people forget is they want you to get it right. They want you to get it right. They want to be tapped as an expert, and they want you to get it right because they're tired of seeing all this fake stuff happen in fiction and in TV and all that kind of stuff also.
And as a family physician, a lot of my writer friends do call me, and their questions all sort of boil down to, in the end, I need to almost kill someone. I need them to be mostly dead, but not dead. How do I do that? And then we talk about it. I'm sincerely hoping that this conversation I had with K.A. Tucker between here and Toronto about 5 years ago across international lines was not tapped by the FBI because, because otherwise I'm in deep trouble. And before we go on to Michael, I was going to say, no lie, when I was deployed to Iraq back in 2003, we had a guy that came in and his helmet had a hole right here and a hole right there. But somehow the path of least resistance was the bullet went through the helmet, went around his head, took off a little chunk of the top of his ear, and then went out the back. But if you looked at his helmet and just saw it without seeing him, you would think that guy is gone. And he walked in and he ended up getting plastic surgery, and you can't even tell anything ever happened to him. And I will never forget that. So even though we go for the believability, sometimes things happen that are unbelievable, but that doesn't mean they're not real. So just a little personal story. Michael, what's your thought on are we going with accuracy first? Was that what we were aiming for? Help me, Jen. You're my only hope.
That's just the direction I took.
Excellent. Tell us about how do you make sure when you're going to whack somebody that people don't go, people don't whack like that. Please edit that out.
Can't tell if we're in like late night, Con Carolinas. So I can't really
Sorry, we
answer
just left
that.
the
I'm gonna have a
PG-13 in the
lot of
rearview
fun
mirror.
with that one.
I can't answer your question the way that I would answer it. But in terms of accuracy, so I have a friend who was an Army medic in Iraq and
Okay.
Afghanistan, and he's also a writer, and so he's very open to me calling him up and asking him weird questions, and if he has a story that's relevant, he'll tell it, and if he does not, he's perfectly happy to theorize on the basis of his experience. However, the other thing that I love to do for accuracy is watch Mythbusters. If you want to see what a weapon has done, there's probably a Mythbusters episode where they show you what it does, and you can do some sort of extrapolating from there. There are also probably horrible people on YouTube who have like bragged about the weapon, and you can kill them off in your novel. And then the other thing that I do, though, probably the most prominent deaths in any of my books have been from disease as opposed to from injury. And so I have read memoirs from people who are suffering from the same illnesses. In A Fallen Autumn, my main character has cancer, and so I read a couple of memoirs by people who have the same kind of cancer to like learn about the process that they were going through physically and mentally and emotionally and things like that.
Sounds like an excellent plan. So it sounds like do your research, do your reading, tap your in-person resources. And I would argue that that's a good advice for if you want to know what actually happens if someone is a cop or a lawyer or a doctor or a priest, probably your best thing is to actually contact somebody like that or that you can get access to, because I know more about how to treat hypertension and diabetes than the average human being, and I can answer all those questions.
Although to be fair, I was gonna say to be fair, like the accuracy is actually always secondary to me, because for me, when I do decide to kill off a character, which happens, it always has to be rooted in how much time have I invested in that character to begin with, because it doesn't matter how I kill off a character if you aren't invested in that character. So a character's death always has to be rooted in the fact of I have gotten the reader hooked into this character. They have some sort of investment. They care about this character, and then I'm going to pull your heart out. And so the accuracy is secondary to the point of have I created a real character that you care about, that you're somehow invested in.
That was actually my very next question. Is we
perfect.
talked about so you're that excellent lead in is we've talked about how to get an accurate death, something that people aren't going to just go, well, that would never happen. But as I said, when you're reading a story, when you're writing a story, it needs to be a good death, and that's what we talked about earlier, like being earned. His name eludes me at the moment, but whenever the really nasty guy in the 5th season of Game of Thrones finally buys it in such a appropriate way, you're like, oh yeah, that's the stuff. And that's, it not only was it accurate, but that was as earned a death as I have ever seen. So most point is that we have to, people aren't going to care if the person dies if you're not cared about them while they were still alive. And so I think building that up is good. Jen, any thoughts on making a death? I mean, death is not necessarily a good thing, but how do you make a good death in your story?
Not just yes, you want to obviously make the reader care about it, but especially I write in first person predominantly, and I feel like that makes it a little easier for you to get sucked into these other characters, because the whole time you're reading, at least with my series, you're reading it from this one girl's perspective, and so she gets attached to somebody, you're feeling that, and you feel her pain when something happens to them. And so especially if you can really kind of build up relationships, and it doesn't have to be romantic, but just kind of building that up and then having the reader experience their grief alongside their own grief, if that makes sense.
I think that's brilliant. Is letting a character in your story, be it first person or otherwise, be the surrogate for the emotions of the death of the character. Sorry, that was a lot of prepositional phrases for a Saturday afternoon. Michael, what you got?
So I feel very similarly in that I almost never kill characters off, partly because by the time I have written a character to the point that they might have died, I'm like, I am not cashing out on the investment of my time and effort just yet. It's, like, I don't know. If I like a character enough to have written that much of them, I do not want to kill them off. Happily, a bunch of my books are sort of supernatural, and so I can, if they have to die, I can bring them back later as really pissed off ghosts. But the way that the number one rule for me about killing a character is that the character has to die trying. That's a really important part of writing a good death for me. Whether they're a protagonist or an antagonist, a hero or a villain, that doesn't matter. As long as they die doing something that they feel would have advanced the story if they succeeded, something that would have advanced their motivation, something that would have advanced their priorities, then it feels like there's some value in whatever it is that got them killed narratively in the first place.
Well, and doesn't the death itself has to advance the story also?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can't just die like that. That doesn't work for all kinds of reasons. And they can't die in a way that's stupid, because then you make the reader feel like they've wasted their time and their emotional energy investing that much in the story to get to that point in the first place. But if they die trying, regardless of whether you want to see them succeed or fail, they're a character who's active. They're part of a dynamic world. They're part of a story that has moving parts. And that's something that the reader can become a part of and invest their attention in and feel like they're getting a return.
I would say that every once in a while, somebody who you can't stand having an ignominious death is probably a good thing. And there's at least 2 or 3 of those. I don't know why I keep coming back to Game of Thrones, but when Blondie McCrowny Pants, drank the poison and falls over, you're like, yeah. And then whenever dude gets eaten by his own dogs, you're like, yeah, good. So, but I mean, those are so earned after they've tried and tried and tried. So I would agree. But sometimes I like somebody to slip on a banana peel and fall on a rake or something. I mean, good on you. Don't miss you. Won't be sending you a card. All right. So I've been all over Mr. Martin's works. What is an example of a death that you have read or seen in a television show or a movie that you thought was just really, really well done, punched you right in the right emotional feely place, and got the response that you clearly, the writer and the producers and the actors of the show, wanted you to get? I think we'll start with Michael on this one.
Oh, no, you can't ask that and then give me no time to think about it.
No, we're going to start with you on this one. I'm going to go eeny, meeny, miny.
Michael, we appreciate your sacrifice.
Go ahead, Michael. I'm just messing with y'all.
Let's see. Well, okay, the first one that springs to mind I can't say because it happens as the last scene of the movie, and it's too good of a movie to spoil like that.
Gotcha.
Spock. There's one that I feel like is great, because that's A, we can talk about it without spoiling anything for anybody, and B, it's an exceptionally powerful death scene. That's a moment when a character that people have spent decades loving, who has been relentlessly heroic, who has been so dependable and reliable and always there for the people around him, completely sort of manifests that in the ultimate final act of being there for the people around him by sacrificing himself. I think that what affects me the most is always a character who sacrifices themselves for the sake of other people, partly because there's more emotional impact than just the death of that character. There's also the emotional impact of thinking about all the secondary effects that has, all the other characters who are now going to have to struggle with the guilt of knowing that happened, the characters who wish that they could have made the same sacrifice in that person's place. Those sorts of stories really affect me. And so the death of Spock at the end of Star Trek II, it just slays me every time. I have wept like a child for over 30 years over that.
And it's not to add even another facet onto what you just said, of everybody on the ship, the one who technically doesn't have emotions is the one who does that out of a deep-seated love for everybody else. And I think that just hammers everything you said home even more. I mean, it could have been any character you love, but it was Spock. I mean, who, I don't feel emotions, Captain. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's such an ultimate act of compassion from a character that for whom we feel a ton of compassion because of the prejudices that he's faced, because of the difficulties that he's had within his own family, because of so many different things. And he returns that compassion, a millionfold in that moment. And it is just such an emotional payoff.
Couldn't agree more. Who wants to go next?
Your dude nose goes.
All right. Well, I was thinking, because there's only been like a couple deaths that have really, really just sort of torn my heart out. And they're both kind of obscure, or maybe they're obscure. So one of them was there's a TV show called NYPD Blue. And there was a long-standing partner. His name was Victor Cifuentes, played by Jimmy Smits. So it's Jimmy Smits' character when he dies, and it's a cop show, and so you expect you're ready for the guy to die in a hail of bullets or whatever, but he essentially dies from like his body just quits working right. He gets an infection and his body just quits working right, and you follow this character for like 7 years, and you're invested in this character, and you're waiting for him to die the cop heroic death, and he dies basically from a tooth infection. So you got that working on something perfectly mundane, something that could happen to any of us at any moment. And this is what takes out this grand figure. And for some reason, and so his death scene, so again, he's dying basically from a virus that they can't really catch. They don't catch this virus. They don't know why he's dying. It's kind of a mystery. His body quits working. But when I talk about the character, the importance of death being rooted in character, it isn't so much how he dies. It was his interaction with his partner in those last moments, where it's just the two of them and they're talking, and his gruff Andy Sipowicz partner doesn't know how to process his emotions, and all of a sudden he's just like, I am helpless in the face of my friend, my partner dying from this mundane thing that we aren't trained to deal with. Every single time I see that scene, my heart gets ripped out, because I'm just like, that is it right there. It's death. It can happen at any moment, at any time, to anybody, and we are powerless in the face of it, and we are just left grieving. Between that and then the dad dying in Big Fish, because Big Fish.
Oh my God.
Right, that's all I gotta say. That's what I'm gonna say, Big Fish.
Hang on. Keep talking, y'all.
Big Fish does it every time. I don't know a guy who has sat through Big Fish who would just like not reduce to tears every time the dad passes. Oh, here we go. I got it too.
I love this movie.
And that death is earned. It's earned from the beginning. And even though you know what's going to happen, it is earned from the beginning. By the time it pays off, you're just, you know what? I'm helpless. I'm just here to cry. That's my job as a viewer. I'm just here to cry. We're good.
That's one of the best movies I have ever seen. I might watch it later tonight now. So
Right.
All right, Jen.
Oh, I've been going through different options, and honestly, I keep going back to this one, and it's not the most obvious one, but it's one of my favorite shows. It's called The 100. It's on the CW.
Okay.
It's in like season 1 or 2. They killed off my favorite character. I'm still reeling from it. Spoiler alert in case anybody watching this happens to later on watch the show. But the main character, Clark, ends up actually having to kill her boyfriend, Finn. Basically, long story short, Finn kind of keeps getting more and more aggressive and violent, and he's just posing a threat to their entire encampment, basically, because he keeps getting violent with these villagers, and he's just not handling things very tactfully. I mean, that's an understatement. But basically, these villagers capture him, and they're like, we're going to torture him. We're going to make it horrible, this and that. And like, there's really no way out. You're watching it. You're hoping, like, they give you hope that, they've always figured stuff out. Like they do in every show. He's a main character. They can't possibly kill him off. And he was, if I remember it, he was the first big death in that show too. And they get you so attached to him, so attached to their relationship. And then Clark goes over to say her goodbyes. And you're like, oh, this is a really sweet, heartfelt moment. But then you realize as she's like hugging him and he's tied to the stake, she stabs him. So that way it's like a quick, painless death in comparison to what these villagers are about to do to him. And so you're like reeling from that and the fact that she had to bring herself to do that. And like, oh, my heart. But I love the way that they not only, because it was a surprise that he was going to die until it got to that point. And then you're like, oh, this is kind of sad. Maybe there's still hope. But the fact that they turned that twist in there and they had Clark, the main character, actually as the one to kill her boyfriend. And you don't realize until they catch that shot where she's like pulling away the knife that, you didn't even think about the fact that she was carrying. So I don't know. I love little twists like that. And the fact that it was a sacrifice on kind of her behalf really to have to do that, but just for his sake.
The one that I have two, and they're both from the 90s. One is the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer called The Body. And the thing that Buffy, if there's one thing for 7 seasons that Mr. Whedon was really, really good at, and it's why I've said a bazillion times, is don't worry about whether or not you enjoyed the first season of any Joss Whedon show, because the only purpose of the first season of a Joss Whedon show is to make you love everybody so that whenever he starts killing them, you will feel it. And it was that way on Dollhouse and Buffy and Angel. It was every single time. The first season, what happened? Maybe wasn't so awesome, but did you end up loving everybody? Yes. And then when the second season rolled around and he starts killing them, it's on. But whenever you have a show where out of nowhere, you expect at any minute Willow or Xander or Buffy or Giles might get killed by one of these critters that's running around in this California town, and then to come home and just find Buffy's mom dead. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, I swear that she did such an outstanding job of looking like someone whose world had ended. And that was, I still remember how I felt the first time I watched that, and the second and the third. And then my other one is the one that it shouldn't surprise you, but it's the moment in 4 Weddings and a Funeral where you remember the title of the movie, and the character's name is Gareth, and he's dancing with his I forget if they're married at that point. I think they are, but he's dancing with his husband at one of the weddings, and he just drops dead. And then you're like, wait, someone just died. And then you're like, this is 4 Weddings and a Funeral. And somehow, even though you go into it knowing someone's going to die, it still punches you right in the gut whenever it happens. And I still remember being pretty affected by that one too. So
along the same lines, Twin Peaks. I'm a huge fan of Twin Peaks. The base mystery of Twin Peaks is who killed Laura Palmer. Literally, she is dead from the moment the show begins. Then you spend a couple of seasons getting to know this character's backstory and like really coming to love this character and understand why her life was so messed up. And then they do a prequel movie where you get to see the last week of Laura Palmer's life. And every couple of years, my husband and I rewatch the whole thing. And every time we start Firewalk with Me, this last week when we started Firewalk with Me, my husband said, maybe this time it'll turn out different. And it's the kind of show where like you feel so much love and compassion and empathy for this character that on the 12th watch through, you're still crossing your fingers. Maybe this time it'll work out. That going into it, knowing 32 hours of content in advance that character is going to die, and still just like really being heart-wrenched by it.
So you can probably guess where my next question is going to go. What is a death that you're kind of like, that so did not work? In a book, in a movie, in a television show, radio play, I guess. If you can think of one.
Yeah, I can think
Sounds
of
like
one.
one.
Hmm?
Was that you coming up with one?
To me, yes.
Yeah, I got it.
Queen Amidala.
Yes.
Mm.
You're in the same wheelhouse as me, so go right ahead.
Yeah, so she dies from a broken heart while her husband slash whatever can have like all of his limbs severed and get taken by the dark side and get his ass kicked by the guy who trained him and like have everything that he thinks is good and powerful in the world that would help him get destroyed in front of him, and he's just dandy. Like that is the worst death in film history. We spend movie after movie liking this character, thinking of her as the mother of this exceptionally powerful figure of Princess Leia, General Leia, like the person that's going to be a hero to generations. And her mom dies of sadness. That is the dumbest shit. Well, that's the dumbest stuff I've ever heard.
And also remembering when Carrie Fisher in 1983 was asked specifically, do you remember your mother? And she says, yes. So not only that, it's not even right.
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more. Padme, you deserved better. Absolutely. Jen?
Oh, go ahead.
Mo?
What I'm thinking of, I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, well, actually, like, I can see that one. Actually, it works. Like, even if I'm bitter about it, there's this part of me that like wants to hate it, but like, no matter how much I'm trying to find one that I didn't find satisfying, there's still this part of me that's like, it still works though. I'm struggling. Come back to me, maybe.
Gotcha.
So again, I'll okay. So obviously, I watch a lot of television. And so right now I'm thinking of, there were 2 deaths on the show ER that to this day bug me to no end.
Okay.
One, there was a doctor who, she had taken over the staff. She was the administrator. I mean, yeah, she was a character you love to hate, but, she had some redeeming qualities, and then she just randomly falls down an elevator shaft.
Oh, the one with the short red hair who had a little bit of
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And she falls down, and I'm like, what? What? I'm like to this day, I'm still bitter about that death.
They made fun of that on Friends, right?
Oh, I didn't see that.
So, Joey Tribbiani was playing Dr. Drake Ramore on Days of Our Lives, and during an interview, he said that sometimes he makes up his own lines because the writers don't do it right. So in the very next episode, the writer has him fall down an elevator shaft, and as he walks up to it, Joey looks at the other actor and goes, "You first," and the other actor goes, "No, Dr. Ramore, I think this elevator is for you," which I still remember is one of the funniest lines on Friends ever. So they totally made fun of that. Okay, who was the other one on ER that bugged you?
Again, it was another administrator who we love to hate, and then like a helicopter falls on them.
Was it the surgeon that was kind of balding on top?
Yeah, so a helicopter had already, in an earlier episode, had already cut off his arm. And then, a season or 2 later, a helicopter falls on him. And I'm just like, why?
So if he was a Pokemon, his weakness would be helicopters.
Helicopters, exactly. But, here's the thing we haven't, we've talked about it, but the whole idea of just the mean death, which I think Joss Whedon is very much guilty of, the mean death, where you're invested in a character. And I get his point of, and sometimes people just die randomly. I get that, but sometimes it just comes across as mean.
Right.
And do I need to go into Firefly, or are we good with my example? Yeah.
I know exactly
too soon. Right.
Too soon. Did you come up with one yet, Jen? Because I can go with one.
Honestly, the only one I can think of that wasn't even like at least a little bit justified in the story or anything like that was, and it was to no fault of the writers. It was just the show got canceled when they left somebody like kind of dead. So I don't know if that one counts.
Who is it?
It's in a show that I haven't actually watched in years, but it's called The Glades. It's like a detective show. And there's like this cute romance subplot and all this. And the main detective, he buys his it's it's his wedding day. He buys his soon-to-be wife her dream home. He like puts rose petals all in it, all this cute stuff, and it's a couple hours before the wedding. And he's taking a final walk through the house. He gets shot. He's laying on the floor. That's the end of the episode, and then they canceled the show.
Wow.
And there's no hint as to what happened to him, why it happened, if he lived or died, and it just, and the writers never even released anything afterwards, at least as far as I've ever found. So again, not their fault if it was canceled, but it's the only one I can think of.
My mind kind of went the same direction as Michael's, and it was the prequels as well. But for me, it's all the younglings.
Oh, see, I think that's a powerful death. I think that's meaningful.
Oh, I think it's totally meaningful, but I don't think the motive. I, in my own mind, have written up the headcanon for the actual fall of Anakin Skywalker. And I understand that they wanted to do fear leads to anger, anger leads to whatever, and that leads to suffering, that leads, etc. And so they wanted to start with fear, but I think that the prequels would have had a much, much more powerful story if it had been jealousy, because all it takes is Palpatine whispering in Anakin's ears once, wow, Padme sure spends a lot of time with Obi-Wan, and that story is full on King Arthur, and I want to watch the heck out of that. But I just don't. I'll accept the dark side so that I can save Padme. I'll give you that. But because I've accepted it, I have to, under orders, just because I was told to, go kill a bunch of children who look up to me like their surrogate uncle. I don't buy it. If you have it to where he's already gone bad, and then all of the Jedi from little bitty on up have been sent to kill Anakin because we have to knock him out, and he's just fighting them, I'll get it. But to have him show back up and just walk in and massacre them, it's never felt earned. Because it'd be like, I want to save Padme, great, go kill all those children. Really? I wanted them to earn that a little bit more, and they would have had a lot more time if they hadn't wasted 1/3 of the trilogy with him being 8. But that's the problems with the prequel trilogies are a complete 6-hour panel in and of themselves. So
that's one where I feel like they could have had something like if he had said to him something along the lines of like, a Jedi not yet trained will be what stands in the way of you completing your goal or saving your life or whatever, and he just makes a logical leap that he must be one of the younglings. He doesn't get that he's being misled by this like lie of omission of not saying, by which I mean somebody from the next generation and they're not even born yet, because they're going to be one of your kids. You know, like I leaving it open so that he makes some false assumptions and then goes and kills the younglings would make a lot more sense. And
you just wrote a better story than George Lucas could in 18 years. So good job. Strong work. Sorry, Mr. Lucas, but you didn't get that one right.
All right, y'all. It is 5:45 local time, and so we have about 5 minutes left, and I'd like everybody out there in. Oh wait, we never let Jen answer the. Did you get a chance?
The past one about basically disappointing
you did. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Right. So
it wasn't a good answer, but
it was a great answer. It was a great answer. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure I wrap up on time. But didn't want to cut you off. Let everybody know where they can find you online if they want to come and purchase your books. And we'll start with Jen. Go ahead.
So my series, again, the EOS Dawn series, you can find them on Amazon as ebooks and as physical books. They're in multiple different local bookstores around the Charlotte area. And you can also just find more information on my website. There are 2 different names for it, so whichever is easier. There's eosdawnseries.com. It's EOS. Or there's just the general, it's uberguberman.com, uberguberman.com.
Awesome. Mo?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. All my branding is under mauricebroaddus.com. So that's or Maurice Broaddus. So Twitter, Facebook, my website, Maurice Broaddus. You'll get there. My latest 2 books, like I said, is Pimp My Airship and The Usual Suspects. 2 very different genres. So you got middle school or you got steampunk. So there you go.
Michael? I write 3 series for Falstaff Books. One of them is the Withrow Chronicles, which I finished last year. That's like vampires and urban fantasy set in North Carolina. Then I have behind me Fallen Autumn. That's a science fiction detective series that I write. That's about a sci-fi noir set many thousands of years in the future. And then I also have the Servant Sovereign series, which is part of the Shadow Council archives, which is historical time travel urban fantasy set in San Francisco, and starts with Through the Doors of Oblivion. And the second one, All the Pomp of Earthly Majesty, just came out. And you can find all those on Amazon, or you can find them at falstaffbooks.com. And if you're looking for me, then you can find me and links to all the other places you might want to find me at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com.
Right. And I'm Darren Kennedy. I write the Fugue and Fable series and the Pawn Stratagem series, contemporary fantasy and sort of paranormal thriller mystery. Got that backwards. And I'm at DarrenKennedy.com, and like Mo, pretty much if you type Darren Kennedy into Google, you will have no difficulty finding me whatsoever. Thank you to my awesome panelists. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and look forward to seeing all of y'all, hopefully in real life at some point in the future, out on the con circuit again when the Rona, as Jen calls it, has decided to return to its cave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.